I'll give you Jessica.
Thank you. And yeah, repeating my thanks for everybody here at the Frick. It's been a great pleasure and such a fascinating afternoon. Thank you. I've got the pleasure of speaking with Jarl and Len, who have rather big shoes to fit into now that we've been hearing about people like Virginia Dwan and not to put any pressure on you guys, but a really sort of fascinating lineage, I think, of people who have been eager and brave enough to move into areas that are not the traditional forms of collecting that we're so familiar with. We've got a slideshow that's running that incorporates both images of Len's collection and Jarl's collection, and also some images of works that pertain to aspects of their patronage, which will be relevant to our conversation. So those will be sort of running during our conversation, and we can point specifics out as we go along, but hopefully you can read the caption below and get an understanding of what they're directed towards. But to begin with you, Len, you've often told me how your sort of passion for art and your collecting really began with seeing the Richard Serra talk to Lipses in Dia Space in Chelsea in 1997. These three enormous Corten steel, sort of extraordinary sort of engineering feats that you witnessed there. And interestingly enough, I think your response was not, I want these, and I want to own these, I want to take them home. Not such an easy feat, but it was not the desire to collect them for yourself, but actually the question that you had for Michael Govan, who was the director then, was how on earth are you going to make sure that these remain with Dia forever, because they are extraordinary and they should never leave the collection, which of course was not something that would have been possible without your support, which indeed came to pass. And of course, all of the people here who've been up to Dia Beacon know that those three Talk to Lipses now live with a fourth, thanks to you and Louise in the incredible train shed at Dia Beacon. But I always found that such an interesting beginning point, because most collectors, the story that they tell you is, I bought this little watercolor, and that was the beginning, and of course I don't care for that anymore, but these are all the other things I've done subsequently. Yours was in fact the story of supporting art for another institution, and indeed, in fact, work that was extremely unwieldy. I don't think anybody would have looked at those works. They were the first Talk to Lipses that Richard Serra made, and thought, this is something for me. So I just wanted to ask you sort of how you think about that in retrospect, and where that inspiration really came from.
Well, Louise and myself dabbled in art. We had an abode, an apartment, and then a house out in the Hamptons. And, we bought prints, and we bought some outdoor sculptures. Nothing serious, but we loved everything we did. We never really, never ever bought a piece of art for money's sake or, for investment, but just rolling along and doing our thing. And Jay Chiat, some of you may remember the famous Jay Chiat, was a good friend. And he kept promoting me to join the board of Dia. And I said, I had no interest in joining a board. And he said, oh, we do fun parties. And I said, Jay, I have no interest in parties. So he invited me to go to join him to see the Richard Serra 3 Talk to Lipses in Dia in Chelsea. And I went in, and it was, a light bulb went off. I was totally awestruck, head over heels. I'd never seen anything like it. And for me, it opened up a whole world of possibilities of what art could be, because I was used to seeing things, pictures in frames. And so began to jump into the art of that period. Louise came along for the ride. I like to say we packed our luggage and we're still traveling. And so, we just went from here to there. We did so many things. I mean, over time, some of the Western projects were mentioned here. We contributed to Heiser's project. I must tell you that we gave him, at the point, the last big gift, which was supposed to complete the city project. And it was supposed to be done in 18 months. So 18 months later, we went back to see the finished work, and we realized it wasn't going to get finished. And Michael said, well, it's not going to be done in 18 months. Who told you that? I said, Michael Govan. He said, no, it's not going to be done for 9 years. Well, it's 12 years later. But I sure hope he finishes that, because that is an amazing, amazing project. So I guess the torqued ellipses for me showed me the connection between art and architecture and space. The whole idea or concept of seamlessness. Because I didn't see the building as an impediment. I saw the inside and out as seamless. And I think I was one of the first to observe that large-scale outdoor sculpture looks better indoors. And that I saw the connection between installation, architecture, and art. And if the artists, such as Donald Judd, did the art and the installation, then they came together and should stay together and be preserved forever. So the whole idea of permanent art really crept into our lives. And we thought, yes, exhibitions are good. Museums do exhibitions. That's part of what they should do. But the art, the monumental art, these are landmarks of our civilization. They have to be preserved. They tell us what people were doing and thinking at that point in time. So we've made that commitment to permanent art.
I want to come back to that, Len, but Jarl, you've similarly had a sort of very intentional beginning with your collecting, and sort of after exploring various other avenues, you really alighted upon the light and space artists with an incredible passion that has sort of taken you to collect some, extraordinary works by people like Doug Wheeler, Hans Hacke, in fact, from the East Coast, and of course the incredible Terrell space that you've built in your home. Again, a sort of example of something that is, not the painting that hangs on the wall, rather the commitment to give over a very large part of your home to permanent installation. But I wonder if you can talk also about sort of what brought you to that place. How did you sort of navigate a field and arrive? What was it that really drew you to this type of work, which is not easy to live with and requires a sort of life-changing, certainly domestic experience anyway.
Well, I would love to tell you there was a lot of great thought put behind this, but there wasn't. It was, like most things in my life, almost completely accidental. Wanted to collect art, as many people did or do, but didn't really know exactly what I wanted to collect. And I think what we did, my wife Pamela and I, was very similar to a lot of people, buying a little of this, a little of that, some prints here, a painting, oh, that looks nice. No thread, no commonality at all. I knew it was wrong because I'd been doing a fair amount of reading about collecting, and a lot of what I was reading stated that you really should have a thesis or a theme, and I figured, well, sooner or later, one will hit me. I'm not just going to pick one at random. And so this went on for maybe 12 years of rambling around, complete random purchase of things. And at the same time, I mean, there was a reference made earlier to Doug Christmas and, the work he was doing in Vancouver at the time. I knew him in Los Angeles, and I would go by the gallery, and he would always take me in the office and show me books and talk to me about minimalism, which I had no interest in. None. But for some reason, I've asked him years later, why? Why did you talk to me about this stuff? He said, I just had a feeling you were going to like it. And sooner or later, I was actually in New York. At the time, it was Warner Worth on the Upper East Side, and there was a John McCracken show, and I think there's one of the images here in the slides of a stainless steel piece called Triton, and I saw it and went, oh my God, that's it. And the light went off in my head at that moment, and that's when I knew what I wanted to collect.
Then Bridgehampton where you spend a great deal of time, has really become the home for some extraordinary works that you've commissioned, including a land art work by Maya Lin, the Noguchi Pavilion. Some of these are passing by on the screen, the De Maria Pavilion as well. Bob Whitman's video installations that you've put in your pool house as well. So this commitment really to works that are beyond the two dimensions, works that you're not simply hanging on the wall. You have a wonderful collection of two-dimensional work as well inside the house. But how do you see? You've talked a little bit about this relationship between the interior space, but these are also exterior works. How did you see that development unfold? I mean, what led you to really transform your landscape, really, in Bridgehampton into a series of works that are dedicated to individual artists?
Well, I think for Louise and myself, our citizenship is as important as anything we do. And I consider it more important than what I do in business. Being connected with art has given us the opportunity to support the communities, the various community arts of art that we have supported, to be part of facilitating of great works of art, so that every year we spend a fairly large percentage of our art budget, if it were, on public works. And so, for example, with the Noguchi Pavilion, the Noguchi Foundation was trying to raise money. And we were able to buy some pieces from the foundation, which gave us the inspiration for the garden and tea house and so on that you've seen. But what we did at the same time is, while we bought them, we also donated them back to the Noguchi Museum, so that, we'll get to live with those, and then the art will go back to the museum. And similar to the Walter Di Maria Pavilion that we built. We love Walter and his work. That art will be committed, as well as the funds to build a building for some museum at some point. Mm-hmm. So if it was just a matter, and we've done that, we've given a lot of pieces of art to museums, but as you well know, we need more than to have art stored in the ever large warehouses of museums. What happens to these works? Do we get to see these masterworks? We, the taxpayers, have paid for them, in effect, by giving tax breaks to the donors. Well, why can't we see them? But in terms of the permanent works, they have to be shown. They should be in every cross-section in America, as I've said to you.
So you almost see yourself, Len, as a sort of transitory owner of these works, and ultimately they'll have a life elsewhere.
Well, as collectors, we all have our homes, and usually the population of our houses too. So there's the work of art on the wall, and once every 6 weeks or so, we have people come over. And so we have 5 or 6. And there are millions of people in the world. I mean, to be able to help those people see what we see, to us is the bigger picture. So we enjoy, many times we'll go to a gallery and see a work of art that we really love. We know we can't use it. And we'll say to the gallerist, do you know a museum that's interested in the work? I mean, if you do, we'd be glad to consider a gift. So that actually motivates us as much as owning, because we kind of feel like we own it anyway, and we get more wall space.
Jarl, of course, I'd love you to talk about the Terrell light work that you have in your home picture plane. Maybe describe a bit about what was involved in commissioning that, really, and sort of how it came about. I'm interested actually in relation to what Len said too. It's a very kind of communal space as well. I mean, maybe you can talk about what the...
I think there's an image up right now on the screen of... it's a screening room, and it began... I also happen to like film and live in LA, and wanted to have a screening room, and actually was starting to build one, construct one, and again, Jennifer Kellen, who worked at Ace Gallery at the time, came over to deliver a work of art, and we started speaking about the space, and she said, "What do you think about having Terrell design your screening room?" And it was one of those, you know, the power of a great idea. You hear it, I was like, what a great idea. The world's most expensive impulse buy. I was like, yeah, I'll take one. I mean, I joke a little, but it was almost like that. So it was a long process. We had all sorts of fits and starts, but it ultimately got completed, and we try to use it as a communal space. And I agree very much with what Len said about having people being able to experience art. We try to open our home as often as we can. We've never turned down a request for an institution, so we have groups come through. We've had to start to limit the size. It's a little unwieldy. But I think that's an important part of, I think we're all stewards of these works, and it's a shame when things are in storage. It's whether it's collector storage or whether it's an institution storage, and we're just, you know, stewards of the work for short periods of time.
And you've also, Jarl, you know, like Len, you've had a sort of great role as a patron as well. Probably the work that certainly I'm most familiar with your support was Michael Heiser's Levitated Mass, which was referred to a little bit earlier, but the extraordinary installation that he has at the LA County Museum that you helped to bring about. But perhaps you can tell us a bit about sort of what drew you to that work in particular, and to sort of Heiser's gesture.
Well, this is where we all have something really in common. And I am not the patron that this gentleman is here. I'm a much smaller scale. But when I got a call from Michael Govan, you know, like we all have, and
Anyone else get a call?
all right. My wife doesn't let me go to lunch with him anymore. So Michael calls me. It's funny, if you've seen the documentary on Levitated Mass, which was really quite good, because there's so many things going on. It's the history of, it's Michael Heiser's history, it's the history of the LA County Museum of Art, it's about the project, it's about transporting, it's about the meaning of art, how people in communities respond to art. Because it was, you know, this rock was pulled through the city of Los Angeles during the financial downturn, so a lot of people were saying, why, what a waste. So it really got into the philosophy of art and the importance of art in society. So there were a lot of layers. It's a great documentary, and in the story, Michael tells the story of calling me. He's thinking, Heiser calls him, and Heiser says, I found this rock, and he had done the original sketch. I don't know, it was in the late 60s that he did the original. I know we have so many experts here. What was the year? And I remember in Berlin seeing the original sketch that he had done. And so all these decades have gone by, and Heiser is at a quarry in California, and he sees the rock. And he calls Michael Govan. He says, I found it. I found it after, you know, since the 60s. I want to do Levitated Mass. So Michael's thinking, who is crazy enough to buy this thing? And he says, Jarl, I'll call Jarl. He says this in the documentary. So he calls me up, and it's a great story, because he says, he tells me the whole pitch. I said, fantastic. What's this going to set me back? And he said, well, I have good news and bad news. And he said, the good news is the rock is not really that expensive. It's this massive rock. It was like $85,000. I said, well, that's great. Done. I'll send you the check. He goes, well, the thing's going to cost a lot more to get it installed. I said, well, how much more could it be? He says, I'm thinking $5 million. I said, I'm not in for that. I'm not in for that. I said, but I'll tell you what I'll do. And this, I said, and this was, we were co-conspirators. I said, I'll buy the rock for the museum, because I know once you have it, you're going to have to move forward. You will have no choice but to do something. And he said, great. I said, so then a week goes by, and I get another phone call. He says, you're going to kill me. I said, I'm sure I am. Why? Why am I going to kill you? He said, well, we need more money. I said, what, did they raise the price? He goes, no, we have to weigh it. You have to weigh the rock? He said, yeah, because we're going to have to build this vehicle to transport it from the quarry, and we have to weigh it. I said, well, how much could that cost? He goes, $85,000. So I said, I'll make you a deal. I'll give you that money, but do not call me for 2 years. And he didn't. But it got done. The ultimate price, I think, ultimately was, close to $10 million for this incredible installation and transporting it. But the documentary, if you're interested in this whole notion of collecting the uncollectible, and a remarkable artist, Michael Heiser, and a museum director who really pulled off the impossible, it's a great documentary.
It's a fascinating shift, though. I mean, we often don't talk about the numbers behind these projects, but to go from the what was it, $27,000 double negative to the $10 million levitated mass. I don't know what that says about our world. But Len, you were very instrumental in facilitating the arrival of Spiral Jetty into Dia's collection. Sort of officially donated to us by Nancy Hold, of course, but it was really also through your support acquiring a whole body of works by Smithson that are in Dia's collection and on view to this day. What what draws you to these land art projects? I mean, what was it that spoke to you about those in particular?
Again, I think they tell the story of our civilization. I think they're beautiful, beautiful works. I tend to take art in right here. I'm a visual person generally, but I feel art, more so than I look at it. I'm much more attracted to works that I feel than Louise can get into paintings a lot more, and she'll look at a painting and see an awful lot in the painting, and I'll see very little. I'm not particularly, interested in the lines or the techniques as much. But if I'm awestruck by a piece of art, and it doesn't have to be large, if I'm awestruck by a piece, then that's what makes me go. So seeing the Spiral Jetty and looking at Heiser, though incomplete, just being at Trinati, I mean, we set up a major endowment for Trinati. Our family did, but you go to Trinati, this is a museum that is a work of art. It's really not meant to be a museum to fool around with exhibitions. I mean, this is a work of art. The arena is a work of art. So when you go to places like this, you see the 100 metal boxes. For me, that's minimalism's I'm sorry? No, the greatest work of art in Florence.
Sistine Chapel.
Sistine Chapel. That's like the Sistine Chapel to me. So, I look at it and I just want to stay in the space. Yeah. I just want to exist there.
Which is a good segue, because Jarl, a number of years ago now, you visited Walter de Maria's The Lightning Field, and I remember talking to you soon after that, eager to hear, what you thought of your experience, and you said that you found it a life-changing experience. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that, but also, has that changed the way that you think about collecting?
It makes me realize how futile it is. Yeah. It was the most remarkable experience that I've had with art ever. And I've been lucky that I've been able to see a number of things that aren't open to the public. Rodin Crater was referenced, which I think is just a miraculous place. I've been to the city, Heiser City, and I think that's just breathtaking. And it was mentioned earlier, the notion that Di Maria had, which is that you needed to spend 18 hours with this work, I really think is a very important part of it. and the scale of it and the incredible ambition. And I remember speaking to you about it, and it made me, I still love other works of art. I still like looking at a painting. I like looking at a little, drawing. But after I see that work, it makes me think of everything else in a very different fashion. And it really recontextualized the whole notion of collecting, owning things. I still like that, I enjoy it, but it makes me realize, as Len has done, how important it is to support institutions like DIA, because we can't own these things. We shouldn't own these things as individuals. We need to be helpful and have other people have access to them, because it is really a remarkable experience. And I know so few people will be able to experience the lightning field, but because of your work, people are able to. And I think I'm still processing it, frankly.
Len, I mean, you were very fortunate in getting to spend time with Walter de Maria, and I know he's an artist that you've collected, but whose sort of ideas, one could say, his sort of concepts, I think, have really affected your thinking quite deeply. Maybe you can just share a little bit about your thinking around his work, but perhaps also, what did you learn from time spent with him?
It all connects, if I can tell a little story. Well, first of all, let me say Walter was one of the most brilliant people I've ever known. And just listening to him is just fascinating. I was awestruck by his intellect. So what we see is a simple thing. I mean, it's not a simple thing. And you learn more about art, and you learn more about yourself and about the nature of things. So here's what's interesting. I was a child grew up in the 60s. And there were heady times in America. We were protesting the war and for women's rights and for civil rights, and very, very heady period. And there was a radicalism built in. And I was kind of naturally radical. I wanted to see change. As I came to the new art and I realized what these artists did, there was this, there's always a precedent for art. But the 60s, to me, things changed a lot in a radical way. So through DIA, I got to know minimalism and conceptual art and performance art. But then, luckily, and I never knew it existed, I was able to travel across the ocean and get into art de pauvre, which I didn't know existed. But here's the amazing thing. So I'm loving Sarah, and I don't realize that he and Di Maria are buddies. And the last piece of art we bought was a Sarah work dedicated to Di Maria. And then we're really, really love Boetti, as you do. And then we find out that Di Maria and Boetti knew each other from across the ocean. That the Italian artists are more radical than the American artists. And then we see both and we didn't know this, he and Di Maria were interested in the subject of order and disorder. So along comes Maya Lin, who's a very good friend. And Maya Lin had built 2 buildings for Louise and I, a library and a chapel at a freedom school we built in Tennessee. So Maya gets to do the final piece in our gardens, and I don't know that she's a devotee of Di Maria and Richard Serra. So, it all comes together, and we're just groping and just seeing what we feel and what we love. And then all of a sudden we have a story to tell, but we weren't trying to tell a story. We were just responding to the individual works and emoting to those works. It's kind of fascinating how so many of these people connect.
Yes, yeah. Particularly the intergenerational connection there with people like Maya, I think is fascinating. And James was looking at sort of what the next generation. I think that's a subject that we are certainly fascinated by at DIA. How do we continue to support artists in this way? And which, of course, it's an impossible question, perhaps. But Jarl, I wanted to ask you, if we've talked a bit about the limitations of financing, but if there were no limitation, is there something you'd want to undertake that would sort of extend your experience as a patron and as a collector in a way that you couldn't possibly imagine right now?
Well, I do like the idea of, the things that have been discussed today and the history going back to Duan. And I just think this whole notion of making these works available to as many people as possible is a great thing. So I think, yeah, I don't have much in the way of an ambition as a collector very much anymore. I love it, but I think if the money were limitless, and it's not, I don't think I would really materially change what I'm doing. It's interesting and I like it. I think it's good because it's a way to get money to an artist so they can live. My theory on anyone that buys art, anybody buying any art from anyone for any reason, I think they're a hero to me. I think that's a wonderful thing. It helps institutions, it helps the artists. But if I had any ambition, and the trip that you arranged for us to the Lightning Field really opened my eyes to the idea of ambitious projects that could not happen were it not for people like Len. So I'm all for that. But one of the things you said about the 60s, just some scholar in the room maybe wants to write this book. Something was in the water in 1967, 68, because it wasn't just the visual arts that changed, music changed dramatically then too. I mean, radical change overnight. There's a great book there for a scholar.
Len, you touched on this before, the sort of very dear related notion of permanence. I mean, something that I think the institution was really established to encourage these long-term installations and in many cases permanent installations when we think of the Soho sites of Walter de Maria that we still run, and of course the Lightning Field as well, but in Bridgehampton near you, the Dan Flavin Art Institute. Maybe you can talk just a little bit more about how that's become so important for you in your thinking and why, sort of why this idea of the longevity of the stillness rather than the change.
Well, if you look at, let's say, statues, they're all over the world. They exist permanently, pretty much so. They don't get taken down, they exist. It's a work of art, it's a statue. So if we put 4 walls around the statue, then we would say we have a museum. Well, we have a permanent place for the statue. So if we put 3 or 4 statues in there, and let's call them sculptures, then why not have that be permanent? So my feeling is that every small and large town and city in America should have its monuments. The monuments don't have to be old war heroes. The monuments could be works of art, which basically represents how they feel, about the culture of their times. So I think that enriching, how many Americans go to, Asia or Europe or exotic places to see strange and exotic things. Why can't we have more of those things here? So I think one of the things that encouraged me about DIA, and you'll have a lot to do with this in the future, is that when we built that place, the generosity of the space now has begun to be emulated by many people. Many people are doing their own museums. I don't mind the personal museum because at some point it has to go somewhere. So people want to own the museum in their lifetimes, well, that's fine, but at some point that will be a public place. So the more we see of that, the engagement to have collectors or individuals or wealthy individuals connect to art, see the importance of it, and then make their contribution so they don't have to be through formal institutions. You know, they can do their own thing. They can work with local artists. They can have their own vision. And then over time, I think it enriches the landscape of America, because we have, in this last 100 years, certainly been major contributors to the world of art. And of late, we have been leaders in the areas of from minimalism to conceptual art and beyond. So we're not just lagging France or Germany as we did before, but we are, as a culture, we are in the forefront of the art world. I think we need to be in the forefront of the world of building places to put art. We're not there.
But specifically with an intent for permanence, the idea of repeat visitation, that there's
Permanence, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with exhibitions. I mean, you know, exhibitions are fine, but we also need permanent places. So I think there should be a variety of art. I mean, people make a pilgrimage here. I mean, how many people you see, they go to the Lightning Field, and then they go to the Spiral Jetty, and then they make the pilgrimage to Chinati. And everyone goes crazy when they see Chinati. They love that place. You know, I mean, I think it's great. You know, Judd wanted to be there. You have to go to West Texas. He wanted to be away from, these artists wanted to be away from the city. They wanted to be out there in nature. And they wanted you to make a commitment to go. You got to love that. But I think, as well, we need them in our cities, in our town. And I think it's going to happen. It's naturally happening. You've seen some of these places in America. Look what Mucha did in Milan. It was kind of, we don't take credit for it. But, you know, it's kind of deal-like. You know, the generosity of spaces is what defines it. So I think you're going to see more and more of that. You know, and by the way, the size of the art dictates that, doesn't it? Because the scale of art has changed now. So the old spaces, the things that are put in frames are for European-style residences, you know, with paneled walls. But we need different spaces. There's light. There's ceiling height now. The architecture of our places, residences have changed. We need to change the architecture of museums, because we have to stop spending $1 billion to build, you know, 50,000 square foot of galleries and 100,000 square feet of offices. You know, we need to see. I mean, I love MoMA, but we need to see MoMA's art. I want to see Picasso. You know, I want to see Matisse. I want to visit it over and over again. They have it. You know, so I think you're going to see more and more of that as professionals like you join the fray.
I'm sure I'd love to open it up to the audience, but Jarl, I'm just wondering if you've got anything to add to that, this sort of idea of permanence within art. I mean, it's such a sort of specific notion, I think, this idea of dedicating space and place and time, as Michelle was telling us about. I mean, it's such an important factor for so many of these artists.
I agree. I think it's important. I think there's some works of art that are really ambitious, that are about very big ideas that should be permanent. Not all art, but I think many. And a delayed response to the earlier question, if money were no object, actually, in the scale of things in today's world, this is not a big number, but I guess in real worlds, but for real people, it's a big number. But one work of art that I think would be great to have permanently displayed and available to a lot of people is, and I think her name was mentioned earlier, Marcia Hafif. She was in the 2014 Hammer Biennial, works in Southern California, and I'm going to get this wrong, you can correct me. It's, I think, something like 86 panels. I think it's called Grayscale. Yes, and it goes from white to black through 86 or whatever the number is paintings, and if you stand in front of them, and I've seen it displayed in rows, I don't like it. I think it's intended to be one long row. And to me, what a remarkable concept. What a great idea. That's something that should be available and seen permanently in an institution.